body and grinding down the center.
Start with this. I'm sure most of you have heard by now by way of Probellum's social media account. More additions to Probellum's first shows of 2022. Estella Mossely, recent Probellum signee, Estella Mossely, is going to defend her IBO title the opening night of #Evolution in Dubai, alongside John O'Carroll and others.
This card takes place the day before the Sonny Edwards card.
This one takes place on Friday, March 18th, and the other takes place on Saturday,
March 19th.
They're essentially two separate cards set to go down in the same weekend. Same weekend in March.
My understanding is Estelle's supposed to be fighting Yanina Lescano.
Yanina del Carmen Lescano of Argentina, who sports professional record of 10 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts.
That's word around the campfire.
A decent fight for Estella Mossely in what will be her maiden voyage as a Probellum fighter moving forward. And it is encouraging that they've already got a fight for her lined up, whether it's against Yanina or someone else, as the actual fight does not yet show up on BoxRec.
Supposed to all be going down in March.
And it's encouraging that Probellum is getting Estelle out there so early in the year, because that does leave the rest of the year open for other potential matchups, other cards that she may feature in. She wasn't all that busy last year. She only fought once.
And that was against Verena Kaiser in March of last year.
Verena Kaiser, not a bad fighter, not a bad fight, though that was Estelle's only fight all of last year. And if she does return this year in March, it will have been a full year's time since Estelle fought anybody. And because Estella Mossely is campaigning in the lightweight division, having fought just above lightweight before, they're at super lightweight, you have to imagine that at some point she is going to have to deal with Matchroom if she wants to fight for one of the major 4 alphabet titles. At some point, she's going to have to see Eddie.
Whether it's for a title at lightweight or super lightweight.
Because that is where all those titles are. In the lightweight division, Katie Taylor's got all the belts, all the major ones. Estelle, she's in possession of an IBO title, but we know the major 4 don't recognize the IBO title. If Estelle plans on fighting in big fights, meaningful fights, significant ones, at some point she's going to have to call Eddie.
And the same is true at 140 pounds.
At 140 pounds, Chantel Cameron has 1/2 of the alphabet titles, and Kaylee Rice has the other. They're supposed to be fighting, though news seems to have gone quiet when it comes to their fight. No official fight date, nothing yet.
But if Estelle wants to fight in a big fight, a major fight, she's got to call Eddie.
Because Matchroom is where the big names are at 135 pounds and at 140. Now, I have no doubts that Probellum is quite capable of keeping Estelle busy with the other lightweights and the other fighters at or around lightweight. I mean, I'm sure they could make a Jennifer Hahn fight happen, or a Victoria Bustos fight, a Rose Volante fight, a Miriam Gutierrez fight. Common opponents with Katie Taylor, the biggest name anywhere at or around these weights. I'm sure that Probellum is quite capable of making fights like that happen for Estelle. But if she wants a big fight, a major fight, she's likely going to have to deal with Eddie.
The story is, in March, she's fighting Yanina Lescano.
She's a good fighter, and that's a good fight.
She killed 3 people when she was 5 years old.
Really?
Nah, I made that last part up.
But it is a good fight with a solid fighter for Estella Mossely Yoka. It's just that Estella Mossely Yoka ain't the youngest fighter. I mean, she's certainly not the oldest.
But she's not the youngest, and she hasn't fought in a big fight yet.
She's got no signature victories, no statement wins that would make a statement, send one out to the rest of the lightweights in the lightweight division. I wouldn't mind seeing Estella Mossely versus Firuza Sharapova, maybe Sofia Ochiguava. Why the fuck not?
The next fight's supposed to be a defense of the IBO title.
But how much press is defending the IBO title gonna really get you? I mean, how much, really?
It's good that she's with Probellum.
And it's good that they're getting her out there early in the year so that she can get back out there a few more times, God willing. It's all good. But I have to admit that it seems like she's long overdue to fighting a significant fight with a significant fighter. It does feel that way, and let's see if that's not what the future holds for Estella Mossely now that she's with Probellum. In other news, I'm sure most of you have heard by now, Demetrius Andrade intends to vacate his 160-pound title and move up to 168 pounds. Sources told Sports Illustrated now. Andrade's team is working on completing a deal to face Zach Parker, with the winner to become the mandatory challenger for the super middleweight title held by Canelo Alvarez. And the boxing community is likely going to be divided when it comes to this subject. They're either going to understand or they're not.
I've already seen plenty of people accusing Demetrius of ducking Yanibek.
Yanibek Alimkhanuly of Kazakhstan, unbeaten southpaw, up-and-comer, trained by Buddy McGirt. I've already seen plenty of people accusing Demetrius Andrade of avoiding this guy. This is one of those things.
This is one of those things to where you're either going to sympathize or you're not.
Yanibek Alimkhanuly is already being heralded as the second coming of Kazakh Thunder, Gennady Golovkin. Yanibek is already being held in some regard in some circles, small ones, because only really hardcore boxing fans know who Yanibek is. He doesn't present the same marquee value, the same scale of a fight as a Jaime Munguia would, and that's likely why he's not a high priority to Demetrius Andrade.
You stay at middleweight and defend your title against this guy for what?
What does Demetrius Andrade get out of it? If he were to stay in this division that has not been kind to him over time, if he were to do that in order to keep his WBO title and defend it against Yanibek, what does Demetrius get out of that? Won't lie to you, I would have liked to have seen that fight because it would have been an interesting matchup of contrasting styles, the boxer versus the puncher.
But I get it, I understand.
You stay at middleweight for one more fight, and that window of opportunity to box Zach Parker, it might close. You might not be able to go through that if you don't strike while the iron is hot. Fighting Zach Parker lines you up for a Canelo Alvarez fight that you may or may not get. But even if you don't get it, you still get the chance to become a 3-division champion. Whereas if you stay at middleweight and you box Yanibek Alimkhanuly,
you're going to stay at middleweight for one more fight to accomplish what?
Say Demetrius Andrade were to stay there, defend his title, and he were to beat Yanibek Alimkhanuly. What does that do for him?
Listen, I can only tell you what I think.
And if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, I understand it. I get it. You gotta strike while the iron is hot. If the Zach Parker people are receptive to doing a fight with you, and they're receptive to doing a fight now, then you've got to do it now. Because if you wait, that opportunity might not be there beyond a Yanibek Alimkhanuly fight. And while I think that would have been an interesting fight for Demetrius Andrade,
yeah, I think it would have been a good fight.
The boxing fans might look at Yanibek as being more capable than a Zach Parker. And you know what? Maybe he is, but that's their perspective. From where Demetrius Andrade is sitting, he gets more out of a Zach Parker fight than staying at middleweight a while longer, where nothing has happened. He didn't get the Charlo fight, didn't get the Golovkin fight. Ryota Murata hasn't boxed anybody for 2 years.
What the hell am I staying around here for?
This place is a dump. I'm moving up in weight. What I'm gonna do is move up in weight, see about becoming Canelo Alvarez's mandatory challenger. And even if he don't fight me and he vacates his title, I still get the chance to become a 3-division champion. All I gotta do is...
All you just gotta do is fight Zach Parker.
In that same super middleweight division, Daniel Jacobs is set to be taking on John Ryder. I don't know about an Andrade versus Jacobs fight happening if Daniel Jacobs beats John Ryder, though I wouldn't dismiss that possibility. If John beats Danny, I could see John challenging Demetrius Andrade for that brown belt.
The both of those guys got more of a profile than Yanibek does.
Daniel Jacobs, former IBF middleweight champion Daniel Jacobs, who beat Sergio Mora 2 times, beat Peter Quillen when Peter Quillen was an unbeaten fighter, fought Gennady Golovkin, fought Canelo Alvarez, more recently fought Julio Cesar Chavez and Gabriel Rosario.
John Ryder's known as the man who unofficially beat Callum Smith.
And the both of those guys transatlantically have more of a profile than Yanibek does, so I see what the rhyme and the reason might be. I see what the logic is.
The guys that want to sympathize with Demetrius are going to sympathize with Demetrius, and the guys that don't,
they won't. But I'd be lying to you if I said that he's not making the right decision, that he's not making the right move. I think he is making the right move. Stay at middleweight for what? Other news at or around these weights, I'm sure most of you have heard by now per tweet from Michael Benson. Canelo Alvarez has reportedly been offered a 1-fight deal to fight Jermall Charlo next by Al Haymon, and also has been offered a 2-fight deal to fight Dimitri Bivol next, then a Gennady Golovkin trilogy by Eddie Hearn. and we really don't know what decision Canelo Alvarez is going to make, though he has plenty of time to make it. It seems like that Lunga Makabu cruiserweight excursion is not a foregone conclusion. It's not a lock. It never was, and I've been telling you guys for weeks that I got the sense that Canelo wasn't married to that idea, that he wasn't fully committed to going all the way up to cruiserweight to take on the winner of Makabu versus Machunu 2, which is set to go down this weekend.
I was perfectly okay with Canelo Alvarez going up to cruiserweight.
Making that history, attempting to become a 5-division champion. I didn't poo-poo all over that idea like some others because I view Lunga Makabu, a bona fide cruiserweight, a southpaw, a hard puncher. I viewed him as more of a threat to a Canelo Alvarez than a Jermall Charlo.
For Christ's sakes, that guy can't knock out junior middleweights and middleweights.
He's not the same threat to a Canelo Alvarez that a Lunga Makabu might be, because a Lunga Makabu stands a better chance of taking it out of the judge's hands than a Jermall Charlo. Fat chance of Jermall Charlo beating Canelo Alvarez on the cards. It's just not likely. Thus,
The bigger threat to Canelo would have been a natural cruiserweight. That goes without saying.
though that proposition did receive some resistance in some circles, usually American fight fans, American ones who think you have to fight an American fighter to fight somebody.
Even when that American fighter's a bit of a nobody.
Though I don't want to get ahead of myself, I do happen to think
Texas.
down in Texas, this is a fight that could do considerable business at the gate, where Jermall Charlo's core supporters are. Those guys are, and Canelo's. I think this is a fight that could do fairly well, at least as well as the Caleb Plant fight did commercially. Between Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Bivol, for my money, the more interesting fight is the Bivol fight. I don't think much of Jermall Charlo in any respect, I don't.
But does this mean facing the winner of Makabu versus Machunu 2 is off the table?
Well, it definitely seems like it at this point, though. For me, I knew I shouldn't get married to that idea when news broke that Canelo Alvarez was making inquiries into a potential Joe Smith Jr. versus Artur Beterbiev fight. And that news broke weeks ago. Back then, I knew that I shouldn't get married to the idea that Canelo Alvarez is going to go up to cruiserweight in his very next fight, that he might have had a change of heart. And I think this recent news heralds that change of heart, that, you know what, he might not fight the winner of Lunga Makabu versus Machunu 2.
That's okay.
That's fine. The two names in the running now are Demetrius Bivol and Jermall Charlo. Jermall Charlo would presumably be a Showtime pay-per-view, but let me remind you of something. DAZN has pay-per-view functionality now for special fights, special fighters, and special events. Canelo Alvarez's return to the platform would be such a special event. In other words, if Canelo Alvarez decides to go the matchroom route, takes the 2-fight deal, and fights Demetrius Bivol next,
Well, that might be a pay-per-view.
could be. And if it is, it's a question of what kind of price point are we going to be dealing with. Is it going to be $74.99 like a Showtime pay-per-view, or will it be less than that?
DAZN announced they've got pay-per-view functionality months ago.
They haven't used it yet, but they haven't had a reason to. Joshua versus Usyk might be billed as a pay-per-view. Need I remind you of that as well, their rematch. And Canelo Alvarez's return, if he returns to the platform, that could very well be a pay-per-view as well. So don't get married to the idea.
Oh no, you might have to come out of pocket even if he fights on DAZN.
And that's the way it's looking. Part of that 2-fight deal is a potential Golovkin trilogy. I wouldn't get married to that idea because that fight would be several months down the line, provided that Canelo actually beats Demetrius Bivol and then moves back down to super middleweight to take on Gennady for a third time. Gennady would also have to get through Ryota Murata. We really don't know if he's going to do that. He's been out a while. So has Murata. But Golovkin's a lot older and more war-torn.
What, you think Murata beats this guy?
Well, in Murata's own town, stranger things have happened. The point I'm making is that a Golovkin trilogy is not exactly a solid proposition. That might require them to meet up at 168 pounds. We don't know what Canelo's mandatory situation is going to be several months from now if he hangs on to all those alphabet titles. Just things you want to consider when you're thinking that far ahead. Now, as far as who I'd rather see Canelo Alvarez fight, well, I'm good with either decision, either choice, either Demetrius Bivol or Jermall Charlo. I think the more competitive fight is the Bivol fight because Demetrius Bivol is a naturally bigger guy than Jermall Charlo, battle-tested against bigger guys than Jermall Charlo, with a better resume than Jermall Charlo at either junior middleweight or middleweight.
Demetrius Bivol's fought more solid fighters at light heavyweight
Than Jermall Charlo has at either junior middleweight or middleweight. So as far as a more more competitive fight that has more potential to be a banana skin for Canelo Alvarez, a more frustrating fight for me would be the Bivol fight, because he's an outside stick-and-move jabber with a laser jab, throws good straight punches, has a good set of legs, good chin, good experience at the weight, whereas Jermall Charlo at 168 pounds, where this fight would presumably take place. He hasn't proven anything there. If I'm being honest, he hasn't proven much as a middleweight, let alone a super middleweight, though the appeal of a Charlo fight is watching that very basic 1-2 fighter.
Give him what he wants.
That guy's been running his jibs for years, playing it safe, so I say,
Give him what he wants.
give him the fight. That's the same Jermall Charlo I saw get buzzed against Juan Montiel. If a guy like Juan Montiel can buzz you, get you to cover up and retreat, a Canelo Alvarez will start you. He'll finish you.
Give him what he wants.
Give him the fight. That's one less souped-up hype job Canelo Alvarez's critics can badger him with. That's one less name they can bring up.
Will that silence his critics?
Oh, no. I mean, the same people not that long ago I saw advocating for Jermall Charlo to get the fight are the same people that started complaining as soon as Jermall was in the running. You heard that right. The same guys that wanted Jermall, or claimed they wanted Jermall to get the fight, are the same guys that started complaining when they realized he might actually get the fight. So no, it's not going to silence Canelo Alvarez's critics.
Those fucking mutants don't know what they want.
But I wouldn't mind if Jermall Charlo actually got the fight, because I reiterate, that's one less name to badger Canelo Alvarez with.
He goes in there, he smokes Jermall Charlo, they're just gonna move on to the next guy.
The next souped-up hype job. If he goes in there, he smokes Jermall, they're going to jump on David Benavidez's bandwagon. If by some chance Canelo Alvarez were to beat David Benavidez, they'd start demanding for him to fight David Morrell. Essentially what they want.
They want Canelo to do a round robin with nothing but PBC guys.
Just PBC fighters. Why they are so in favor of that, why they're so adamant for that to happen, is beyond me. When these guys don't pose the threat to Canelo that a Dimitri Bivol would, or an Artur Beterbiev, or even a Joe Smith Jr.
But that's what they seem to want. They seem to want Canelo to fight exclusively for the PBC.
I'd be perfectly okay with him fighting Dimitri Bivol on the Matchroom side of things. I'd be okay with him fighting Jermall Charlo on the PBC Showtime side of things.
And one fight's more competitive than the other.
Like I said, if he fights Jermall instead of Dimitri, that's one less souped-up hype job to badger him with.
Jermall Charlo fucking sucks.
He sucks. What other fighter could get away with going the distance with the likes of a Juan Montiel?
Fucking sucks.
He fucking sucks. But give him the fight if he really wants it. If it's on the table for Canelo, why the hell not? Canelo Alvarez has already separated himself from all of his contemporaries. Thus, at this point, his contemporaries are indistinguishable from each other.
So either one is fine.